Executive Director of Consumers for Dental Choice and President of the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. Welcome to my presentation on marching toward mercury-free dentistry. By the time I'm done, I hope you'll have a better understanding of, one, the history of the mercury-free dentistry movement, focusing on the modern campaign to stop the use forever of this toxic product, and two, the public policy issues involved in the modern movement, and three, how you can make a difference. As you know, dental amalgam today was developed in the 19th century, and it was controversial from the start. Many practicing dentists opposed it, and as we call it, 19th century, we call it a primitive, pre-Civil War, polluting product. It is all of that. It is polluting, we know that. It is pre-Civil War, and it is truly primitive. It can crack teeth. It's vastly inferior technically to the alternatives. Now, the dentists listening to this know that issue much, much better than me, but certainly we urge you to take on amalgam not just as a toxic material, a polluting material that we've stressed heavily for the last 7 years, but also simply an inferior product. The World Health Organization says that we should focus on the life of the tooth. When dentists say amalgam lasts longer, you say, why don't we focus on the life of the tooth, not the life of the filling? That's a pretty good response. Now let's take this thing back to the 19th century, folks, because way back in 1884, here's an ad from a dentist that says he knew it was poisonous. He says they're 1/3 mercury and therefore poisonous. Often, and he lists the things that can happen from having the mercury and the poison in your body. And they knew mercury was toxic then, and everyone knows mercury is toxic today. This dentist wasn't afraid to tell the customers. He laid it all out, this Dr. Smith. He had a basis. He had support across the board. Let's look at Dr. Chapman A. Harris, long considered the father of American dental science. According to Dr. Harris, amalgam is one of the most objectionable articles for filling teeth that can be employed. And this view was reflected, and this gets pretty significant here, the American Society of Dental Surgeons. That's when dentistry and medicine were much more working together. The association adopted an ironclad resolution. If you ever use amalgam, or if you fail to protest, the use of amalgam, you're expelled from our society. That's how strong they felt. Unfortunately, along came another society that embraced mercury, loves it, lives by the mercury sword, will die by the mercury sword someday, I expect, the American Dental Society. But clearly this group, pre-Civil War, knew it and knew it was the wrong thing to do. Now, obviously, there were those who decided to take the unscrupulous route. And unscrupulous was, don't tell anybody it's mercury. Call it silver. You can charge more. The ADA said you can charge more. And people will think it's silver. Gold, you charge the most, then silver, then amalgam. And make people think it's silver. Well, on that PowerPoint, you see on the left this ad from the 19th century, and on the right you see 21st century deception. The Pro-Mercury American Dental Association. We like to call them Pro-Mercury. It's a good word to go with the words American Dental Association. They were telling patients in this 2002 brochure that amalgam is silver fillings. Disgusting that a modern trade group in America would do that, but it worked. As late as 2014, still 1/4 of Americans, when they asked what's the main component of amalgam, 1/4 of them said silver. So clearly the deception, understandably, that those people said that. Now, you know, amalgam and ADA are so intertwined that my friend, the dentist in Orlando, Jim Hardy, in his book Mercury-Free, calls the birth of the American Dental Association and the birth of Amalgam the twin birth. It's a great term, and it's accurate as heck. Some dentists wrote, like Jim. Some protested and fought, like Andy Landerman. I'm going to talk later about Andy. And some dentists wrote and fought. And here's the pioneer, Dr. Hal Huggins. His book, It's All in Your Head. And Hal's book set the prototype in 1976 and said, look, we have to look at this. This is a huge issue. And he exposed it. It became a very widespread red book. He was obviously both lauded and condemned, but he educated a lot of people, and many mercury-free dentists in an older generation traced the start of their work to getting with Hal Huggins. There's another pair of dentists who decided it was time to fight, and these are the founders of the American Academy of Biological Dentistry. And their successor, IABDM, is the sponsor of this film here that I'm doing for American dentistry and American consumers. Dr. Ed Arana and Dr. Gary Varigan of California, and their wives, Carol Arana and Joanne Varigan, and they did the yeoman's work. They had the idea, they put it together, and they got this organization moving with annual conferences. I might add, one thing is they did this just with conferences, not with a so-called membership, because it was so dangerous to have a membership list floating around a mercury-free dentist. And that happened to a different academy that Ed actually just said, no, this is a conference. We're just inviting people to a conference. We don't have any membership. That's how dangerous it was. It's so hard for young dentists to realize that it was actually dangerous, that dentists were losing licenses, losing their license. Many dentists in Minnesota, New York, Iowa, Colorado, Florida, California lost their licenses just for speaking out against mercury-free dentistry. Then came our group. We started in 1996. And there were two co-founders. One of them here is in the slide there, the middle of five people. That's Sue Ann Taylor. And Sue Ann was the co-founder of Consumers for Dental Choice, a journalist by trade from Atlanta. She came to my law firm, Jim Turner and me, in a small law firm, a few other lawyers with us, came and asked us to start a consumer-based, broad-based organization to fight the use and end the use of mercury amalgam. The other co-founder, acting independently, they didn't know each other then, an engineer named Bob Jones, the late Bob Jones, who was an airline pilot, retired, also a champion skier, by the way. And Bob had a conference after Hal Huggins lost his license. And that looked like the end for mercury-free dentistry, because Hal lost his license after a multi-year fight, and the dental boards were after everybody's license in Connecticut and Illinois and Arizona and Texas and all over the place. California, they were going to shut them all down. There weren't very many that were outspoken, and those that were in great trouble. So Bob Jones convened this conference with Hal Huggins there, and I want to tell you about my meeting with Hal. I walked across the room. He knew I'm an attorney, and I'm a former state attorney general. As some of you know, I was elected twice to 2 terms in West Virginia. And I walked across the room seeing Hal Huggins enter, and he came up to me, and he knew my name. He knew I was there to come, and he said, "Charlie Brown, how would you like to help 1 billion people?" And that stays with me. Hal Huggins saying, "How would you like to help 1 billion people?" And you know something? He was right. We are the policy arm, Consumers for Dental Choice. We're not the science arm by any means. We're not, I don't want to say we're political, because it's different and broader than that. We have to fill the gaps everywhere. We're the bridge between the science and the policymakers, the bridge between the science and the public. The consumer education is so much part of our work. The presenting the issue to public officials, to businesses, to the non-dentist community, and I think we're pretty good at that. And that's the work that we've done. But when we started, we had to defeat the notorious Gag Rule, the rule that directed silence by dentists about the mercury. It was a tough time then. Only 9% of the dentists were mercury-free, according to the Christensen study out of Utah. Today, it's 6 times that. But at that time, in fact, I'll show you what it is on this chart. It was 9% then, 27%, 31%, 53%. In that period between the 9% and the 31%, the 27% really, that 5-year period was when our focus was one thing, beating the Gag Rule. And we took it on. I took it on as a lawyer, wearing my lawyer hat and my policy hat too, in Arizona and in California, in Florida and in Minnesota, in Iowa and in Virginia, in Pennsylvania and in Connecticut, in Washington State. We didn't miss Maryland. We didn't miss too many. I went to 26 states working for Mercury-Free Dentistry. It worked. But we had to do it several different ways. One was, as a former attorney general, I would just go see the attorney general or the chief assistant and explain this is a First Amendment violation. I want to credit my wife, Ann Swanson, an attorney, communications attorney in Washington, who said, you are going to have to focus on the First Amendment, the right of free speech. And I said, on business, on commercial? And she said, absolutely, absolutely. It's being extended. It doesn't just apply to political speech. It applies to commercial speech. And we did it. And that was the key, because we could go to the attorney general, such as in Iowa and such as in Oregon, and say, such as in Florida, and say, this violates free speech. And in all 3 of those states, the attorney general came down on our side in favor. I mean, it didn't always work, but it certainly worked in those states. And that was one approach that worked. Another was litigation, administrative, before the dental boards. And we won cases there in Florida, in Minnesota, Alabama, Pennsylvania. Another approach was going directly into the courtroom. Mark Briner was told that he could not even publish an article in the newspaper. He was told by the dental board, quit writing articles in the Connecticut Post critical of mercury fillings. Good God, we don't have a First Amendment in this country, but dentists can't write an article in the newspaper. Well, in fact, he succeeded. He went to the ACLU, and they went to federal court, and he succeeded. Maryland, we had procedural. We used procedural law rather than constitutional law to strike down the Gag Rule. We succeeded with dental board appointments. Dr. Chester Yokoyama in California, Kevin Biggers, consumer advocate in California, Dr. Jessica Sapoff, in Washington State. That came about from a meeting I had with the Attorney General, Christine Gregoire, who was running for governor. And I said, if you're elected, I sure hope you'll appoint a mercury-free dentist. And she was very interested. And I'd explained why. There had been a delegation in her office led by Sandy Duffy of Next Door, Oregon, a lawyer, advocate, friend of ours, president of Consumers for Dental Choice at one point, and now deceased. And so with Sandy working the inside and me talking directly to the Attorney General, she decided when she was governor she would appoint a mercury-free dentist, and she appointed Jessica. Now let's talk about the California story, because that's really one of the real highlights we've had as a movement for mercury-free dentistry. And the times were very, very rough for the consumers, and I can tell you they were rough, because dentists were told they couldn't be mercury-free, and consumers weren't told a darn thing. I accepted the request of Dr. Andy Landerman of Sevastopol, California, to go back in to retrieve his license. He lost it simply for speaking out against mercury fillings. We filed a petition to the board, and then you went before the board. By the way, the board messed up so badly that day that they changed the rules after that, and you don't go before the board. You go before an administrative judge. They didn't want to expose themselves to the public after making fools of themselves, and let me explain. They started shouting at Andy, yelling, screaming. It was just, they lost it. Anybody that would talk about mercury-free dentistry in a public forum, they were appointed to defeat Merck. That's how they got cleared. That's why the Dental Association asked the governor to appoint them. Democrat, Republican, didn't matter what end of the state or political party, philosophy, race, religion, whatever. As long as you want to destroy mercury-free dentistry, to the California Dental Association, you were eligible to be on the board. And that's the only ones on the board. Well, I didn't like that day at all, of course, because Andy was just shouted at. But I did go back when the transcript arrived. As a lawyer, that's my duty to read that transcript carefully. And I saw a line in there that thrilled me because it was so outrageous. The president of the dental board said that the amalgam-free practice does not meet the standard of practice in California. You cannot be a mercury-free dentist in California. I saw that. I said, we're going to hang that guy on that. We're going to do that. So we did. We hired an excellent press person, superb, and he connected me with reporters. He did background like crazy on the reporters. He decided the issue. The issue would not be amalgam safe or unsafe, good or bad. It was a debate. May we debate the presence of mercury in dentistry? May we debate it? Because the dental board had said you can't debate it. Every dentist has to offer it. He succeeded. Page 1 in the largest newspaper west of the Mississippi, the LA Times. Great story. And the headline was a debate about mercury. It shook up the board so badly because they were on the front page. They'd never been exposed for their outrageous system of regulation. The dental board president called me 2 days later and says, please come before the board. We intend to change our policy. I tell you that story not because it's a nice, good story, but it also tells you the value of investing in our nonprofit group. We had to hire a press guy. It seems to me it cost us $12,000, which at the time was about all the money we had in the bank. And it was money worth it, obviously. It had to be. We changed the dental board by leading with a great story in the media. Sometimes we need media people. Sometimes we need other forms of advocacy. Sometimes it's obviously just running our office. It's travel. It's getting to the right place at the right time, building the team. And that's why it's all voluntary, but that's why it's so great. So many dentists who donate to us, and some of you I'm sure watching this, others I hope would think about it because the impact we have had on mercury-free dentistry is, I assure you, dramatic as the growth shows. Now, not only did ending the gag rule free up dentists, because it did, to advertise, advocate, and advise mercury-free dentistry, it emboldened the American Academy of Biological Dentistry. By then, Dr. Rana had passed away. Carol Arana was running it, and it was a chance to enlarge, to start membership, because they could say who their members were, to have officers. So Andy Landerman, my friend from California, and Mike Margolis, my friend from Phoenix, who got together for a whole weekend to chart out what could be done. Then the Academy got together and decided, let's elect officers, let's get an executive director. Carol is ready to hand the baton to someone. Let's get going. And they elected Bill Glaris as president and Andy Landerman as vice president. Soon after, they hired just a really talented naturopath, Dr. Dawn Ewing, to be executive director. And she is also, by the way, a hygienist earlier in her life and was a member of the Texas Board of Dentistry. We talk about dental board members. They've had a talented string of presidents since Bill served. Two from Arizona, Mike Margolis, I mentioned, and Nick Meyer. And Nick has this latest book on mercury-free dentistry and many other issues, the Holistic Dental Matrix. And I know Nick put a lot into this book, got a lot, and has a lot to say. We had two presidents from Texas, John Trowbridge, and there you got into the medical side. When they created the new group, they called it the International Academy, not American, of Biological Dentistry and Medicine. And John picked up the torch and said, yes, I'll lead this as a physician. That was important. And Joan Sefcik's been president. She is just one of the major supporters of ours, an Austin dentist and certainly a close friend of ours and a hard worker for mercury-free dentistry. And two presidents from the Northeast, first Blanche Gruby from Scranton and Felix Leal, who is the president now as I deliver this tape to you all. I want to circle back to Andy Landerman because he got his license back. And the irony is this. The California Dental Board continued in its stupidity and would not follow the law, which was to write a fact sheet that gave the information against mercury fillings as well as for it. They like to talk for it. They didn't want to talk against it, but the law required them to do both. The legislature got disgusted with them in 2001 and literally voted to disband them. Disband the dental board and start over. So at the end of 2001, the Dental Board of California shut down. The end of the dental board. The start of 2002, there's a new dental board, new appointees such as Dr. Yokoyama. Dr. Landerman then got his license back and practiced with great distinction for another decade before he passed away. And the irony, as I shared with Andy, and I shared in the eulogy as well to his family and many friends like Bill Glaris, who was there, was that the irony is the Dental Board of California shut down Andy Landerman. And then a decade later, Andy Landerman is in practice and the Dental Board is shut down. Isn't that wonderful? We also went and got a license back for Larry Hannes in Iowa. And here's a story, too, again, of how we juxtapose policy, reality, economic and political reality to win our mission. And that is, in Larry's case, and Larry had a lot of friends, a lot of admirers, and he needed to get that license back again. He was shut down solely for being mercury-free. And you'll recall I mentioned earlier that the Iowa Attorney General declared that regulation unconstitutional. So we had a legal basis. We said that what the dental board relied on was unconstitutional, ruled unconstitutional. Therefore, you need to give Dr. Hannes back his license. That was a great legal argument. Would it carry the day by itself? Probably not. So we needed more. Well, I asked Larry to assemble a group of supporters. And I can tell you, he assembled a group in this church basement 2 nights before the hearing. Incredibly, just enthusiastic group, a lot of people, 40 people probably. And I had, that day, I'd been in Des Moines and I obtained the phone number of the governor's office, checked it out, make sure they answered it and everything, not a voicemail, because the governor's office don't do voicemail. They want someone to answer their phone. Anyway, I said, now look, y'all, here is the phone number of the governor of Iowa. Now I want everybody in this room tomorrow, because the hearing, was 2 days later. So tomorrow, I want you to call this number, and here's what you say. I want a mercury-free dentist. How come I have to go to Omaha, Nebraska, or St. Louis, Missouri? How come I have to leave my state to get a mercury-free dentist? How come the dental board won't allow Dr. Hannes back into practice so he can be a mercury-free dentist? Well, people made the phone call, I can assure you, because the day of the hearing, the morning after that, I walk in, there's the dental board director whom I knew, and I said hello to her, and she said, someone you need to meet here, they've asked to meet you. And it was a young man who was a staff member, an assistant to the governor. He was there to watch the hearing from the governor's direction or the governor's office direction to watch the dental board to make sure, because you understand the point. I mean, governors do not want you to leave your state to pay money to anyone in any other state. They like sales tax. They like commerce. They like business. And any governor, of course. And they want you from other states to come in to see them. So when I said the dental board is taking business away from our state and having people have to leave the state, well, we pushed the right button on that one, folks. Now, having won the gag rule, we then switched to our new offensive, which was consumer awareness. And you can see a couple of these charts. That one on the left is Connecticut or Maine. It's Connecticut. They look alike. And the one on the right is one of our other states. We have these charts now in Connecticut and Maine and California, we mentioned earlier, and New Hampshire, city of Philadelphia, and internationally too, by the way. Consumer awareness, letting people know about the mercury. What is it that's in the fillings? They're not silver fillings. We knew most people didn't know, of course, because of the gag rule. No, but how could they know when their dentists were even told they couldn't even write a story in the newspaper? So clearly we had to do that. We took a Zogby poll in 2006. Zogby took a poll, and in 2006, and it was 20-some% knew what's the main component of amalgam. It wasn't a trick question. We didn't say who's buried in Grant's tomb, what's the main component of silver fillings. We said what's the main component of amalgam. Only 20-some% knew. So we knew we had our work cut out for us, and we started. We did Mercury-Free Dentistry Week. And intervening, and you see this name on the chart too, is Dr. Joseph Mercola. And when he rolled up his sleeves on this thing 7 years ago, I can tell you it was a huge difference. He reaches millions of people, receive his email, and hundreds of thousands read it every day, more than read the Chicago Tribune, more than read newspapers in America. People read his website. He has time and again made Mercury Amalgam his lead topic. And I might say that's good for consumers, of course. It's good for dentists because he also lists dental societies such as IABDM and lists our website. We have a website of dentist names. The websites, a number of websites that list dentist names and information, because he wants people to go to Mercury-Free Dentist and only Mercury-Free Dentist. And that's a point I've made in probably every interview Dr. McCall has done of me, and there have been quite a few, and other opportunities when I get to speak to the public and speak directly to consumers, such as on tapes like this. And that is, don't ever give a nickel. If you're Canadian, don't ever give a loonie, or a pound if you're British. Don't ever give $1 to a dentist who uses mercury fillings. I don't care. It's not just on you, on a child, on anybody. If they give it to the welfare child, shame on them. Don't give them anything. Go to a dentist, and they're everywhere in America now. They're everywhere in Canada and Europe and all over the world. 25% of the dentists in the Ivory Coast are mercury-free. We've done a survey. 25% in Tunisia, too, more than 25%. You can find a mercury-free dentist on this earth, and go to him or her, and don't let these guys that keep using mercury, whether they use it on you or not, I know they won't, but whether they use it on anyone, we shouldn't do it. So we thank Dr. Mercola. We salute the states that have these fact sheets laws if they enforce them, and that's a big question. We're finding that the states pass the law and may not enforce them, so that's a project for us right now. So you can see in this part one how we took this campaign from pure defense, which was ending the gag rule, giving dentists the right to practice and advocate mercury-free dentistry, to advertise mercury-free dentistry, which they do now, to consumer offensive and consumer information and changing government policies nationally. And by 2010, we were ready to take this campaign internationally. So that's a good time to break for part one, and we'll pick this up on part two, folks. Thank you very much.